Everybody else kind of jump on here. So we know there's people joining as we go, but we really wanted to thank you all for taking the time to join us today on this webinar. So the topic today is going to be strategies to support culture change in senior living, engagement, staffing, and more. We know that this is, a super topic right now. And we have a number of people attending, which we are very excited about. So we really thank you all for taking some time out of your day this afternoon to come have a nice discussion with this crew here. So a couple of housekeeping items. There's some stuff going in the chat box right now, which is
Matt, can you hear me? Okay, Nick, you're frozen, so you just froze, Nick, so I was just
gonna unfrozen?
Make up something. Yeah, you're unfrozen now.
Weird. Okay. Lovely. How is that now? Got it. So yeah, if we want to put everything into that Q&A box as opposed to the chat box for the questions, that would be awesome. That way, if we don't get to them all, we can actually answer them after the fact as well. But as you can see, there's a lot in the chat that makes it a little difficult for us to sort through. So with that being said, again, thank you all very much for joining. My name is Nick Niemer. I am with LifeLoop, and I'll be kind of moderating this panel. We do have William from Spectrum, who I know you guys probably saw on our link, had something come up and was unable to join us today. So Amy from LifeLoop will be taking his place. But with that being said, I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll get going. So Heather, if you want to go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm Heather Tussing. I'm the COO for Morning Point Senior Living, and I'm grateful to be here today.
All right. Maura?
Hi, guys. First of all, I'm honored to be on this panel, and thanks everybody for joining. My name is Maura Feeney. I am currently working as a Senior Vice President of Development at Heartland Development, and also supporting Solution Advisor Group, which is a division of Solvair Senior Living. And my background is the past 8.5 years working in senior living on the operations side.
Awesome. Go ahead, Matt.
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Matt Reiners. I'm one of the co-founders of Eversound, coming out of Boston area today, and it's just really great to sit on this panel with people that I consider friends, and it's so nice to see some of the familiar names in the chat there. So excited to be here today. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Amy Johnson. I am the co-founder and CEO of LifeLoop, and I just found out I was going to be on this webinar about an hour ago. So I'm excited. Nick's kept me in the loop on everything. Big shoes to fill with William not being able to be on here, but very honored to be part of this panel and the people on it. And I second what Matt said about all the familiar names. It's going to be a fun hour. So thanks for taking the time.
Awesome. Yeah. So again, thanks to everybody for joining and to this great panel here today. So, with that being said, I think the reason why we're all here today is to discuss, a number of things that are really going in, that are happening in senior living right now. We know it's been a very tough, difficult last 2 years, and continuing with what is happening with COVID today. We know there's been a ton of staffing shortages and a lot of staffing things going on. Trying to create and get residents engaged has been a huge priority and something difficult when we're isolating, quarantining, trying not to spread COVID across the board. So, I think that's what we're really going to focus on. And I think, Heather, just starting with you, what are some of the biggest factors that you see or you all take into account at Morning Point to really enhance that culture from, not only your employees, but your residents as well?
So I think that we have to look at everybody as a customer. So we don't, yes, obviously our residents and their families are customers, but in addition to that, our associates are customers as well. And also vendors. We want to make sure that we have good vendor partnerships as well. So we have different customer service groups. And I think that it's important that we focus on all of those areas. And I think when we have an optimal win is when you can include resident engagement and associate engagement and combine those into one. For associates, they can probably go a lot of different places and leave senior living and possibly even make more money. So we need people that do things for the right reason, but we also want to make it a fun environment if possible. So one thing that we found successful is if we can have competitions that involve both the residents and the associates competing against other communities within the organization. They love it, and that is, and it gets everybody excited. And so it's the residents and the associates participating together and just really having fun. But also that that competition adds a lot to it. So I think it's important that we make sure that we keep it a fun environment. There's so much heavy going on in the world right now, and we're definitely dealing with it. We're healthcare, right? But we also have to have fun as well, and we have to bring fun into the work environments even during challenging times.
No, and I love that. And I mean, I think again, we look at this, and everybody who's in senior living, right? They're in this for a reason. They love our seniors. They love taking care of our seniors, and anything we can do to engage them and get them involved again, right? Get them on the floor with the residents and engaging with them on an everyday basis. The way that the reason why they joined this industry to begin with, right? Is so important. So, and more, I mean, I think. Adding on to that a little bit, I think you bring a really cool perspective to this too, with kind of your side of the development. Engaging between the investment groups and the operators, especially from kind of that staffing side. So, I'd love to hear your take on some of those things as well.
Yeah, I would parlay on to what Heather said about the residents and the engagement and the staff or the associates and the engagement. People who know me, I don't know who on this call is seeing me or know me, but the people on the panel know me. I follow basically 3 tenets in everything I do, and it gets back down to the human side of being kind, being present, and being committed. And that's all tied together with this authentic button. And Heather, that's what you're talking about. Everybody on this call, everybody that's on the chat box, whether they're from Las Vegas, Virginia, Washington, Michigan, they're all in this for a reason, and it's from heart. It's from passion that they've got that's really driving their behavior. I believe really, really, really strongly, and anyone on this call knows that, that's worked with me, that you have to be authentic. You absolutely have to go into the building and be yourself and deliver on what you say you're going to deliver. I also believe that the staff are equally important to the residents. We all talk about caring for our residents, but if we don't care for our staff, we're not caring for our residents. They're all part of the huge senior living family within a community, which is a subset of the company. So those are a couple of my tidbits on it. And yes, it's interesting, Nick, you and I talked about, I work on the outside kind of. I work on feeling like I'm more on the consulting side. So I'm on operations, but I'm not. I'm building new buildings and I'm renovating existing buildings. But that doesn't mean that when I come into a building that I don't acknowledge, speak to, and engage with the residents, the dining room directors, the activities director, and the caregivers. They need that reinforcement, especially now. And without bringing up the COVID, we've all been taxed by COVID beyond normal times. And I mean, anybody on this call, I'm sure that's listening has had COVID or had COVID once or twice or 3 times by now. And we're fortunate to be sitting here. And I really believe that. I believe that we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to our residents and our staffs to really support each other. So that's my tidbit.
No, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. And a couple things I might come back to, that came to mind. But Matt, I think, looking at us, right, from the vendor side of things, right? So LifeLoop and Eversound, and, I think we're age-wise about the same age as a company. But, I think as you look at how our companies kind of came about, right, it really was because of the operators and the folks in senior living looking at really changing this culture, right, and looking for things to help them with that. So, what are some of the pieces that you hear from your communities that you work with, from your team as well? I mean, I know we do have some vendor partners on here, right? Creating that culture even in your environment, it really trickles down to how we communicate and work with our clients as well.
Yeah, so I think, in terms of working with communities from the vendor side, right, we're grateful to play a small role in supporting those heroes on the front lines and really understand everything that they're trying to do day in and day out, right? I'm sitting in my office right now. I'm not in a community. But whatever we can do in terms of how do we continue and work as a team too with the providers, because they have got apparent problems. And from the vendors, if we're not listening to those, if we're not adapting, if we're not creating solutions that are actually going to be used and are actually improving that quality of life, I find there's just a lot of synergies between us. And the more that we can work as a cohesive unit and try to put these best practices into place, I think that's what is going to continue to push this industry forward and really just trying to scale up how we're improving that quality of life.
No, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, I think Amy, you probably can piggyback on that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think for us at LifeLoop, one of the things that we really asked ourselves during this time was, what do we need to be doing differently? And I think one of the things that we decided as a company is what is that product vision, and is it what it should be based on these times to support the communities? And we did adjust it. I think it kind of is talking a little bit about what Mara was saying, is how do we create communities that caregivers want to be a part of? And how do you build that synergy? Because if you do that right and you do that well, then your residents are going to be more engaged. If your staff's engaged and they want to be a part of something, everything else is going to hopefully go better. Now there's this shortage, so it's also how do we attract more people to the industry, and how do we focus on things that maybe haven't been focused on? I think one of the Q&A questions I just saw come up was, should there be a budget for engagement? And that is 100% something that we're seeing change in the industry right now. It should be a budget. It should be a higher budget than it has been in the past. And it is the pulse and heartbeat of your community. If you don't have a budget for engagement, and that could be just like doing different things. It could be technology. It could be a lot of things. Those things have to change, because that is the pulse of your community. So those are all things that we're seeing from a vendor standpoint. And it's on the vendors to kind of adjust their vision to best support their clients as well.
And Nick, I have to agree with both what Matt and Amy said. This notion of vendors being partners and being relationships that extend into the community, and they go past the corporate line and they go out through the communities, is so critical. Again, anywhere where the vendors can help as bootstraps to help us out on the operator side is huge. It's absolutely adored, and it's embraced, and it's because you're coming at it from a different lens. So all the R&D you're doing in terms of developing your products, et cetera, we're looking for those partnerships all day long. So I want to just support your comments, Amy and Matt.
Well, I think the way that we look at this, right, is we're trying to be an extension of your community, right? We are not just providing this platform. I mean, we are an extension of what you all are doing, and us bringing the best of what we can do can be a direct reflection on you all as a community and organization too, right? So I think that's how we really always try and approach it, and I think it is. You guys aren't clients, you're partners of ours, and for those that have worked with us and with the folks at Eversound, I mean, I think that's what we really focus on, is how do we enhance these partnerships to help you all and your residents and staff thrive within your communities. So
just to piggyback off that, Nick, I think, you think of LifeLoop and Eversound as technology companies, right? But I would make the case that we're more service companies, right? And senior living in itself is a service company. So what service are we providing to senior living providers to just enhance their overall service to their residents? And it's just, we can make it win-win, and the more that we're talking and collaborating and just making sure that we're putting our best foot forward, I think will just set us all up for success.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, we always say the same thing. It's service first, that we provide a platform, right? We provide software, but if you don't have the service, nothing can really come together the way that you want it to. So, I think, looking at that, because I think bringing some of these technologies and a number of other things into play can help with really the staffing, right? The recruitment side of things, I think, is a big struggle for everybody at this point. And I think there's a number of factors that contribute to how do we get, the right staff in here, and how do we get them to stay? I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, right? So, Heather, could you give us some tips or some ideas on some of the things that you all do from that kind of recruiting side of, showing that culture and then keeping that culture as, the staffing comes in?
So I think that first of all, we have to throw out like what we used to know and be really flexible and willing to change and willing to pivot. And we have to be willing to try new things and also admit when something doesn't work, but that's okay. Like that's how we learn. But one of the things we've done at Morning Point is we've looked at those communities that have such successful engagement and satisfaction scores and associate retention. And we try to replicate that then across. There's no reason to recreate the wheel. We can look within our own organizations and see where we're seeing success. I mean, I started my career as an ED, so I worked my way through the process. And I think it's important that we listen to the communities, understand what they're going through, and at the same time, learn from them. Let's learn from them and replicate what one community is doing. We can probably do something similar in a sister community. So it isn't really recreating the wheel. And that is so empowering to those communities that we take those tidbits from. And obviously we give them credit. That's so important. But I also think that we have to look at, aside from that, we have to look at how we're marketing to potential associates as well. It's not just a regular ad like it used to be. We're doing trial and error. We're trying different things to see what sticks, what doesn't. We're looking at, statistics from competitors. We're just trying to continuously learn. We're digging deeper into analytics and clicks and all this different information that a few years ago wasn't as relevant as it is now, but it is important now. And we have to dig deeper and continuously learn and continuously evolve, even during a challenging time, even more so during a challenging time.
I'd love to piggyback on that again, Nick. Somebody posted, Dallin said, the most powerful role in business is adjustment. If you don't adjust and learn from your environment, you'll be left in the dust. And if we've not learned, I was in a series of meetings last week, and I kept telling people it really doesn't matter what you did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, even 5 years ago. Sure, it's experience, but the relevance of that experience is really not 1,000% or 100% even applicable right now. What Heather said about pivoting is so critical right now. It's about being responsive. And we as an industry, we're in this constant state of reactionary mode. And COVID it dialed that up to where it was impossible to manage, right? I mean, anybody on the phone would tell you, or on this conference would tell you that it's been an impossible thing to manage intelligently because everybody's moving so quickly and everybody's trying to react to the latest data that came through from the CDC or the shots or this. But pivoting and being aware of your surroundings is so important. It's so important. And I also think that it's really, really important. I've mentioned this to people I work with as well, that there are regional differences even in this country or across borders. I saw there was somebody that was on the call from Canada. There are absolutely regional differences in the way buildings are being run right now related to politics, related to mandates, related to vaccines, related to all of it, related to school closures. And I think we're amiss if we don't pay attention to the regional differences and acknowledge them head on, and help people manage forward, whether it's the caregivers not being able to put their kids in school, or whether it's the kids being yanked out of school for 10 days or 14 days, the uncertainty because they're in COVID restriction. So important to acknowledge. So I would just love to spin this discussion that direction as well, because I think it's really relevant. Most of our caregivers have children, younger children that they've had to pivot. The daycares are closed. They have to bring their kids to work, et cetera. There's so many pieces to it. And by the way, our frontline staff are not sitting behind computer screens. They're sitting in front of our other staff and our residents. So I think that's important also to acknowledge, not just say it, but we go in. Heather goes into buildings. Everyone on this phone goes into buildings. Everyone on this call, no doubt, goes into buildings, and has to acknowledge it and gosh, be authentic with it. So anyway, just a little bit of heart speak.
No, I think it's so important, right? It's across the board, just in life in general, right? We have to be so empathetic to everything that's going on. I think we're learning a lot about ourselves and about the good people in this world and how they're going to go about. And, what they say, the cream does rise to the top, right? Mm-hmm. And if you create this culture within your organization, within your community, within your family, within your friends, right, of this empathy that we've never really experienced before, right? Because so many people are going through so many things. It's a major key to success in this industry, and the best ones do it. I think Heather, when we were talking about this earlier, this industry more than any other that I've seen, right, has the ability from a staffing standpoint to really elevate careers across the board. I think we see so many folks that start in as a CNA, that move to executive director, that move to a corporate executive role, and I think there's so many cool things within this industry that can be so exciting. And everybody in this industry is empathetic, right? You don't come into this if you're right. Not, in my eyes. And so I think just, looking at that and really looking yourself in the mirror and saying, hey, are we doing what we can to make sure that all of our staff is happy and in a good place? And are we looking at career advancement and things like this to get them to where they need to be? And again, that's not just senior living, that's us and on our side of it as well.
I think, to kind of expand on that a little bit, one of the things that I think is absolutely critical in our industry moving forward is understanding, putting ourselves in the shoes of the frontline workers. We don't have the luxury anymore as an industry to not do that. And so truly understanding what their challenges are in order to provide a better environment and a community they want to be a part of is going to be a key to move this along. And it's, money's always part of it, but there's a lot of things, especially the caregiver mentality, that can be done to help move the needle. It's more about a culture change. And I think we're in the middle of it right now. We're seeing our clients adapt. We're seeing them. I always give this example. I'm probably a broken record, but when we first started LifeLoop, we built the whole product around we assumed a lot of things because we didn't know what we didn't know. And we built the whole product around everybody having an email address. Well, what we learned is most caregivers don't have an email address. They also don't have a way to communicate, and so that's a very small thing. That's why we built this communication platform, is giving people a voice is so important. And it's the job of those people above them to listen and do what they can about that voice. If they don't have a voice, they're going to leave. So it's those little things that are going to go a long way. And I do think the industry has to go back to those basics first in order to really build on it. So that's been a big thing that we've seen just from this outside vendor perspective, is how can you provide different, small things that go a long way to create this culture for these caregivers. And I think that alone is going to change the culture of caregivers in a large way.
I agree, Amy. And I think that we have to not just listen, but we have to take that feedback and do something with it when we can. And so we have to show action. And if we can't take every suggestion can't be implemented, but there needs to be a why behind that. And so I think if we all want to feel like we're a part of something, right? Whether it's in our personal life or professional life, we want to be part of something. And so as long as they feel like they're part of something bigger, then we're winning. We have something good going for us. But I also think that, as you mentioned, Amy, we really have to extend the level of grace higher than we ever have in the past, because there are going to be children who you find out the night before that they had a contact at school when they can't go to school for, whatever the difference is, and it's different in every state, like you mentioned. But they are having situations that are out of their control. And is it optimal for us in an organization or a community? It is not. It's not optimal for a community. But you know what? We've learned to adapt to it, and we have to give grace. We've learned to work with different types of schedules. We've been more flexible with schedules, and that's what we have to do. And in the end, it may work out. It may be a good thing. We're learning through this, and I'm sure there are going to be some positives that come out of this experience that we all wish we never had, but we're going to learn through it. But one of the big things is we have to give additional grace to each other. And that doesn't mean we let somebody run all over us. It doesn't mean that there aren't still disciplinaries that can occur, but we also have to go to it from a positive perspective and not looking at something as a negative right off the bat.
Absolutely. Real quick, I'm just going to interject here real quick. So I know there's a lot of stuff going in the chat right now. It's going to be hard for us to sort through it if there are specific questions. So if those join a little bit late, if you do have specific questions, if you can put them in the Q&A, we'll be able to get to them a lot easier as well. But sorry, go ahead, Maura.
I was going to say, I'm purveying or looking at the chat alongside with everything we're saying, and there's a lot of agreement, the grace, the respect, the advocacy for the frontline staff all the way through is so important. I think that's what we're seeing consistently if you look in the chat box, which is interesting. I think sometimes it's seen as not a good business decision, and I think that's what Heather's referring to. The grace that you give and the trust that you give your caregivers, understood you can't be rolled over, but this when I entered the industry 8.5 years ago, it was largely an industry led by fear. And it was really kind of bizarre for me. I came from a real estate background, and intimidation and fear seemed to be, we can always fire you. We can always fire you. You can't lead people like that anymore, whether it's in this industry or any industry. People have got to want to come to work, or they're not going to be working well, or they're not going to be contributing.
Oh, do we lose her?
Yeah, I can. Why she's freezing. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
Well, and I was gonna say, I think there was a question that came through, around talking about the HR department, and investing money in employees is not a loss, right? It's a need. It's how to retain employees, right? And I think it does all start, this whole concept of grace and empathy and all of this. It really does start from the top down, right? I mean, we have to come in from an executive leadership standpoint and say, this is how we are going to operate our business, and it is a trickle down effect that will flow through, and people see that. And I think to what Maura was saying is that fear's it's not the answer right now. It's not the discipline aspect of this that is going to prove to be the way to get through these this kind of staffing crisis. And I think we all know in this industry and any industry that retaining an employee versus hiring a new one is way more cost effective, even if you're paying them more, right? It is very hard to come in and train and do a number of these things. And so I think, not only are people looking at, the pay, but they are coming to work for a culture that they want to be a part of for a very, very long time. I think you're seeing, this generation, right? Even millennial generation, time is what they want more than money, or, some freedom is what they want more than money. And I think looking at all these different ways and listening to what your staff is saying is going to be the best way to create that culture.
One of the questions that I saw come through that I wanted to pop in on, because giving somebody a voice is important, but then what do you do, and then what data do you measure that with? I think it's interesting, being in this industry for 7 years and not being in this industry prior to that, just looking at it differently. I think it's time to measure different things. I don't think measuring the same things we've always measured is going to take us to the next level. And that's going to be different for every company. but all the reasons that people are leaving are not things we're measuring, right? So I think understanding, engagement's a big one. Understanding what is engagement, how do you quantify that? I think understanding why people are leaving, and then really making those changes is a big deal. Occupancy is obviously a big thing to measure, but if you don't have people to take care of those people, that's where the focus should be. So I think the industry as a whole needs to measure different things, and those are going to vary by company, by level of care. It's not cookie cutter, but I do think that's an important thing the industry needs to look at.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, Nick, to your original question, or that I think someone posed in the chat about, how do I tell HR that we need to invest in our people and it's just not a loss? And I think where we're starting to trend towards is if you're not going to invest in them, another company will. And if you're an employee, why would you work at company A when they're not going to invest in your future and your education and really helping you to become the best version of yourself? When company B sees that as an opportunity, because it absolutely is, right? As an organization, we can only get as far as our people will take us and as far as they're willing to learn. And if we're not willing to invest in those people are not going to stay around for a long time, and you're not going to drive the people to sign or to apply as the type of people you wanted to be applying.
100%. Mara, you're back. All right.
Sorry, I got lost. There's technology problems and how you have to learn to fix
Across
it, right?
the board. I know.
Yeah.
I wanted to give you a chance to finish where you were going as well, if you wanted to.
I think where I was headed was we're in a business. As much as I'm talking about the warm and fuzzies largely and the people side and the advocacy, what Heather said is so right on. We still need to keep people accountable. We still need, it is always a business. And I don't know if there's any investors on the phone. They're always looking at the bottom line. They're always looking at the return on investment. And that's what we always are reportable up to. But my hope and my dream is that we can have a successful business and make money and do the right thing at the same time. And I really believe it. And I think everyone on this panel believes it. And I was going to mention, by watching the chat box, I think most people on the chat believe it as well. So that's great humanity for me. So that was what I was going to end with.
Yeah.
I apologize for taking off.
Oh no, it's all good. And I think there's kind of a number of questions in here too around wages, right? And how do we increase this? And this isn't an issue everywhere. But I think to Matt's point, right? In some cases, and granted, not all by any means, but creating this culture can really help, basically get people to stay, even if, your pay has to be competitive across the board, right? But, people might want some flexibility or this different culture where they're willing to take $1 less an hour to be in that and know that there is career advancement and longevity and their voice is being heard, right? And there's grace and empathy. So, I think, I don't have the answers on, getting more wages. I can look to Heather a little bit more on that side, getting more money to them. But I think those are big things to look at and account and say, hey, if we want to keep you, what do you need?
Right. And I think it is, I do, like you said, Nick, we have to be competitive. And one thing we did at Morning Point is we did a competitive analysis for wages and by market, because all markets are very different. Because you do have to be competitive, but you are also a business, so you can't just go to some arbitrary number because you still have to be able to operate and provide the care and the amenities and services to the residents and our associates. But I think one of the things that we can do in addition, because we do have to have a competitive wage, but in addition to that, is showing people how they make a difference. So one thing that I do, I used to do it as an ED, and now I do it on a different scale as a COO. But every new director that starts an organization, and I wish I could do every associate, it's just not realistic. But every new director, I write them a personal note to their home address, and I indicate what in their new role, how they can make a difference in their community, whether it be with associates, residents, families. making a positive change, whatever it may be. I make sure it's specific to them and specific to their role. And I think that's important that we do that through all levels of associates. And like I said, I did that as an ED. It's just my scope's a little different now. It's not possible for me to do that to every associate. I wish I could. But I think it's important that they feel they feel valued and that they know that they're doing something, that if they work at Target for the same amount of money, possibly, they're not going to get the same from that. They're not going to fill their self or fill their cup with the same way as they are working for a senior living organization.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, to piggyback off that again, I think Heather makes a great point in terms of like filling the cup. And, I think there's some questions coming in and like recruitment ideas or strategies. And I just saw something I thought was really interesting yesterday that I think it's a huge opportunity for senior living in recruitment. And, before we started Eversound, I didn't know what senior living was. And, always look for a job with purpose and a job to do some good. And then, senior living kind of just smacked me in the face. And I was like, holy moly, like this is it. And I saw something yesterday from my friend Dean, who's a regional at Ohio Living, and it's on LinkedIn. You can go find it. But they're doing a statewide recruitment and hiring fair. And what he did was capture some of the stories of the staff in that community and just better understanding their why, just asking some open-ended questions. And I think there's just a huge opportunity there as you guys are thinking about recruitment, where sharing those stories of people that are working for you today and really, really trying to understand what their why is and what fills their cup, I think will draw more people that are unaware of what senior living is or have a negative perception of it, and just see that as a huge way to kind of control your own narrative. And, it might resonate with some people and just up the number of people that might be applying and wanting to come work for you.
100%. I mean, I think, the media hasn't done us any favors in terms of, senior living across the board, right? And there's so many cool stories, so many. I mean, we go on for forever. And how do we get that out there and use that as a recruitment tool is so powerful. I mean, I think, we see on the LifeLoop side, right, where families, recognizing these employees for the unbelievable care during these, unprecedented times of their loved ones, and, getting that out to your other staff, having them see, hey, we recognize what's going on. This recognition idea that I'm seeing kind of come through the chat, right, is so important. And, there's just so many good things that we can utilize to make people really just feel better about coming to work in this industry. And like Matt said, there can be this negative cloud over senior living, and there's so many ways that we can get around that.
Well, and I think piggybacking on that, I think people in this industry, we think everyone thinks like we think. We think everybody thinks of senior living as senior living, and it's an IL, it's an AL, it's a memory care, but the outside world doesn't speak our language, and we forget that. So to recruit people from the outside into our business, we need to educate. We need to keep people wanting to work in this business. And someone just posted, I can't find another job outside of senior living because of the stigma from senior living. Yeah, there is a stigma. There's a misunderstanding, and it is on everyone on this entire Zoom, including the five of us, to educate. We're not a nursing home industry, senior living. There is that component of senior living. But I think it's so important to understand that we're not what the press said we were. We are a group of caring individuals trying to protect each other, the caregiver side, the leadership side, the whole bunch of us trying to intimately care for one another. And it always comes from heart, which is curious because the media spun it 180 degrees the other direction. We were killing people. Let's be honest. That's what we were being told. When we were all running around trying to get our hands on PPE, and we were being usurped by the government, who was stealing planes of, masks from us that were being shipped. Let's not forget the passion on how many of us ran around like crazy people to try to find PPE to keep our staff, our residents, and if our family could visit outside even, get them protected. We are a group of loving people that care. And I think sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for that. And I think we dismiss our caregivers. We need to listen to our caregivers. I mean, I can't say it enough, and advocate for them and give them a hug when they need it, a virtual hug if you're not comfortable touching somebody, because they might give you the plague. I don't want to go off on COVID. I'm trying.
I totally agree with that. I think the other voice in this that can be really powerful around the caregivers is the family members, to help tell that story, to help really provide the positive narrative around everything. And why we started LifeLoop was because of our family, and in order to connect family. And I know we're not the only family that feels that way. And so one of the things that I thought was pretty cool, we launched LifeLoop Express, which actually it's part of technology, but it's a postcard that family can just type a note, send it to their loved one, and it spreads happiness to the resident. But we've had people request, well, can I do that for the staff? And that makes total sense. That is a different voice that is trying to provide that community around the caregiver. The community doesn't have to be the four walls of your community.
That's correct.
The people, it's the family, it's everybody. It's the actual community of the town, So creating that environment for caregivers to want to be a part of is a huge deal. And it's not just within your community. It's trying to your actual physical community. It's trying to figure out what that looks like for each property. And that's going to be a little different. That's the problem. It's not cookie cutter. Every senior living community, even within a company that has hundreds, has its own culture. And so that's where, making sure you're measuring the right things in order to tell you. I saw a question about how do you get management on board about, what you need. It does go back to measurement. They need to understand what's going on. And so it's just time to kind of rethink all of that. What's important to your community? How do you measure it? And then what do you do about it from our perspective? But sorry.
Yeah, and Amy, I think from a giving perspective, so much changed. If there's a positive of COVID, that's a positive. We were so, as an industry, I hesitate to say, but clinical. We were so prescriptive, and everything had to be done a certain way. And we did see families giving pizza parties or donating donuts to the community, to the front line. That is so huge, because it's not about the donuts or the pizza or any of it. It's about extending the arm and showing that you recognize the people that are working in the building, because they are family. I hesitate to use the word family, because I know family can be misconstrued. It is a job. It is something you are being paid for as but let's be honest, we all come into this industry for the same reason of heart, and it needs to be acknowledged. So what you said, Amy, is right on. It's completely right on.
Those things, and that creates part of that culture that people want to be a part of. Family members want to party
we were not allowed. I came into this industry because my mother died of Alzheimer's, and that's why I went into this industry 8 years ago. She had to be put into a memory care building, and we were basically told that they couldn't accept gifts, the staff. So, when my mom died, my sister wanted to make these little. It was for my sister. Yes, it was a gift, but it was a small gift of a little, I don't know, it was a little vase with a little flower and had a little cardinal on it, which is very meaning in the senior industry, the cardinal when someone dies. And she was basically told that she really couldn't gift these because it was a gift. It was something that the staff would be receiving that would be, on top of what their staff. They can't. So I go back to that example all the time. I see people in the buildings, and shoot, if I see somebody that's kind of down on their luck, I want to give them something, right? Maybe it's not company policy.
That probably needs to change. From my perspective, it's like, it's happening anyway. And that's what we've learned when we examine how people are communicating. They're just texting on the side and meeting up afterwards. It is what it is. It's definitely some of those things I get, you're running a business, but it's probably happening anyway. So
correct.
Those are all things that we talk about all all the time is like, okay, well, I get that that's a policy, but like, should it be? I don't know, right? And I understand like you have to have rules, but I do think sometimes, especially during these times, you also have to think outside the box. So
Agreed.
And I think tied into that, right, is how do we connect all of this together, right? So we're talking about family engagement, resident engagement, staffing engagement, right? And how do you get all of those things to really come together in a cool way? I know William, what he was talking about, right, was their partnership with iFly when we kind of had our conversation before this. And I just kind of wanted to share it because I know he was really excited about it. But they formed a partnership with iFly, the indoor skydiving company, right? Where every Saturday, any family, residents, staff, can go and participate in this. And it's looking at it really changing the way, again, that senior living is viewed, right? I mean, residents going into an indoor skydiving isn't something that everybody would think about. But when people can connect together like that, I think it's really, really cool and just starts to really, really create that culture across the board. So I think, time flies on this, doesn't it, right? It's already 12:46. I know we have some good questions in here. Before I get to some of those, any last bits that you guys want to throw in here?
I'll say something. I find, we talk about life enrichment and engagement and stuff, and I think at times in senior living, it's been very siloed in terms of roles, and like only the activities director is responsible for engagement. But what I've seen is that the most successful communities don't just rely on their life enrichment teams to drive engagement and wellness. It's really built into the culture of the communities, where every staff member is attuned to the needs of each resident and really adopting and taking that person-centered approach. I find those are the communities that are finding success when it's, from the sales and marketing, doing tours, finding out those personal stories, and really just trying to incorporate it through. I know it's tough when you guys are leaning and needing staff, but I find that it's not just on the activity director, and it's where changing that culture where everybody's involved. And again, it's not just staff, but it's the family members, it's the residents, and it really is a community in all of the sense. And just looking at it, and I think we kind of need to flip it on its head in some scenarios. But I find those are the most successful, where it's kind of in their DNA, and it's not just, oh, that's that person's job, they're responsible for that, and it's just part of that entire community's culture.
I think that makes it authentic, right? It's not just somebody's job. It's coming again. It's full circle, right? It's the entire staff is engaged together as a group to promote the same message and take care of residents and staff. And once you take care of each other, I think the rest kind of happens naturally. And there's a business, and actually, I keep going back to this, but there's a business argument for it. You will do better if you take care of your people. I think somebody said that earlier. You as a company will do better if you, whether it's pay them what they're owed, or give them a day off because their child is sick. It will pay back in dividends, because you've shown heart and you've shown your authentic passion back. It's a people business. The world is a people business. Let's be honest, right?
But I mean, yeah, I think we know that this is a business and we have businesses to run. But at the end of the day, residents stay longer in your communities and staff stays longer in your communities. You're going to be successful, right? And
they're healthier. I mean, if the staff is healthier mentally, emotionally, all of it, so are the residents, and it translates into business, right? The stays will be longer because your residents will stick around. I mean, they'll be healthier individuals. I mean, it's the reason you guys were talking about engagement. It's so important, because if they just cloister into their room all day long, that's not the reason they moved there to begin with, which was what COVID taught us that, right? Get these residents back. I mean, we have to follow the rules and the regulations of the states and be safe and all of that. But you can, I mean, God, I can tell you as an industry, we're so blessed. I mean, with the way people were able to adapt and pivot and stick it out. I mean, I come from a heart of just thankful for everyone on this chat and thankful for everybody on this webinar from my heart, because you've taken care of thousands and thousands of human beings. So, anyway.
So yeah, I mean, I think I completely agree, and I think looking at a number of these questions, a couple of things that people want to dig in a little bit more on. So we'd love to hear from Heather more a bit of this, but it's that idea. This all sounds great, right? The kumbaya culture, all these things are going to create these things, but there's some questions around like, how do I get management to see this perspective, or how can I engage and really push kind of some of those things within my organization to actually improve these. So, I mean, I think, some ideas that you guys could share around that. And I know we've talked a few about them, but some examples that you might have seen actually kind of happen.
So as I mentioned earlier, I think one is just if you have communities that are doing things well, learning from each other, we don't need to always recreate the wheel. We can use what we already have in place in certain communities that created it themselves. They're very, I mean, they all have similar, they're in different areas, but they have similar challenges going on. So I think one, we can learn from each other. And if it's working in one community and they're able to do it within budget, it can probably work in another community. I also think that we just have to, I hope that the leadership has an operational mindset. And so that's one of the things I'm grateful for, is having began as an ED and worked my way through compliance roles and startup roles and all different roles to get to where I am now, is because I'm able to understand that. So I would hope that I have to see both sides, right? I see the community's perspective, but I also see the organizationals. And so what I think is important for companies right now is we still have to strive. We still have to set goals. We still have to make achievements. We still have to move forward, but we do it with empathy. And so maybe the pace is not quite as fast as a rollout as something as we would have happened, hoped before, but we're still being able to make progress, significant progress. And as long as your team understands that you're pacing it, that's realistic for them, then they're probably going to have buy-in into that as well. So I just think it's just a different mindset. But I think that if you are getting resistance and they don't understand, then maybe invite them to the community, let them see what's going on, but try to come to it also with some statistical data as opposed to only emotion. I think emotion serves a purpose, but it also needs to be some facts behind that can help prove your point.
That's fantastic. Because I think, again, keep saying this, it is business, and it needs to run. So it can't just be, hey, let's do this. There needs to be some numbers, some statistics to back up kind of what you're saying as well.
And it does. I mean, and from an organizational standpoint, I think most people on this call understand that organizations have taken a financial hit, even organizations that are doing very, very well. I mean, our census has increased tremendously, but does that mean the profit is exactly the same? I mean, everybody's expenses have risen dramatically. Yeah. Just like for us, if we personally go to the grocery store, we're paying a different price for groceries now than prior. So there's all these different things that we have to look at. So we also have to understand that it is costing organizations more to do business. Does that mean that you give everybody a buy? That doesn't. It just means we have to be creative and figure out ways to make things work. And I would suggest if an organization doesn't have like a group that has, we have something called Chairman Circle, where like 6 different EDs, and they're able to be like spokespeople, and we'll give them different projects to work on. But if those, something like that, to where a combination of voices can be heard across an organization from a community level, is extremely important.
Love it.
If I can say something, because I'm the emotional one on the call, and I love what Heather said. Sometimes the emotion gets misunderstood, and this is from the caregiver all the way through senior leadership. It gets misunderstood as not being a good business mind. And I say that with all due respect, because I am one of those people. I come completely from the heart. I have a very good business mind. However, I often wear my emotion on my sleeve, as do most people in this business that are in the front lines and in the ED role down, sort of. I think it's really, really important to acknowledge that again and to coach that forward. Heather, I love what you said about that, because I think that I've learned a lot in the past 8.5 years working in this industry, that sometimes I put my emotion at the door. Otherwise, I'd be an emotional wreck when I walk into a community. Let's be honest. I would cry at every, person who's in a hospice bed. But I think it's so important that we grow our people to be business people along with emotional leaders. I think that it's so important. I mean, I'm fortunate that I'm in the position where I can sort of be both right now, but I can tell you, and there's people on this chat that I'm seeing, Jeanette, you're one of them. When she first met me, I think she thought I was strictly an emotional. I got really into what I was doing, and I do it because it's the right thing to do, and there's a lot of advocacy, but we do have to be, empathy over sympathy is right. So, but I think it's important to acknowledge, Heather, is coaching us on with that very notion that you need to, it is a business, and we are all struggling as a business model right now with census. So anyway, just my other emotional plea, and I'll shut up.
No, it's fantastic. I think, again, looking at a couple of these other things, there's some questions around like a culture committee, right? I mean, looking at, how can we kind of go about forming these different things inside of our communities? Heather, it looks like some expansion on what the Chairman's Circle does a little bit more might help some folks too.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, so we're getting their feedback. So it could be a project, it could be regarding rate increases, it could be all different across the board. But we give them some options, and we want to hear their feedback on what they think would work best for the communities, because they're actively in the communities. But also giving them ideas to brainstorm and come to us and present to us as an executive team, different ideas that they have to roll out across the organization for the communities. Because we have to hear the community's perspective. I mean, that's vital. They're the ones in there every day. But we can also help them grow and help them. I try to be very transparent, and this is something that I'm really working on this year, is giving as much information as possible as to the why to the communities, letting them see data that they may not have seen before, so that they have a bigger picture view. And that's something that I think that as we progress in our careers, we learn that we may have had a very narrow view in a certain role, but as we've grown, we've been able to see a bigger view. And I think the bigger view an individual has, the more they're going to be able to be of assistance to their community, to their peers, and to the organization overall. So I think it's super important to be transparent with associates as much as possible, but also to grow associates. And I think that that's very important. I truly believe in recruiting and promoting from within whenever possible. So I have 4 new promotions coming up this month, and all internal. And that is something I'm so happy about. And not just for the organization, obviously that's great for the organization because we're keeping that internal knowledge, but also for those associates it's an example of how much growth you can have. I was fortunate enough to have been given those opportunities in my career, and I'm grateful, and I think that shows a lot to an organization when you see those internal promotions from within, and not just at a corporate level, but also at the community level. I think it's pivotal.
Well, again, it's listening to what people are looking for, right? I mean, we want to get people excited to come to work every day. I mean, I think, on our side of the business too, it's, you come in and you're doing, sales or whatnot, but you really have this passion for the service side of it. We want to listen to that, and we want to make sure that everybody's in a place where they can do the best they can for everybody that they're touching throughout that day. And so, I think just opening that up is really important. So we got about 2 minutes left. Just kind of want to go through if anybody has kind of some last minute things that they want to add. Matt, you look like you got something you want to say.
I'm just so grateful to be on this with Heather and Moira and Amy and you, Nick. I think Heather and Moira really speak from the community's perspective, and I think Moira was really highlighting in the beginning there when she came into senior living, there was this fear-based leadership, and that. I think that's on its way out more so every single day. And I think if you're thinking about what steps you can take here in terms of like trying to start implementing some of this stuff, every great adventure starts with a single step. And I think just starting to have those conversations and getting feedback and, hearing from people that are working on the front lines is so important. And to hear people that are in these COOs and SVP, titles that are taking this seriously and really embracing it and running with it. I mean, even spending an hour here talking about it says a lot. And I've got high hopes for this industry and where it's headed in the hands of people on this call, and I'm excited for what's to come.
Awesome.
And I think, Matt, to go off of that, and part of that is building relationships. I think as we build relationships, I mean, we need to have relationships with our teams, with our associates. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to be best friends or go out on the weekend together, but having that relationship to where you have an open dialogue, you know, when they're having a new grandbaby or that their son just won a big soccer tournament. I mean, that means a lot to people. That we have to bring that personal side into work to a degree, because relationships are important. And I know everybody is different in their leadership style, but I'm very much a relationship-based leader, and I think it's pivotal. I think that's what makes people feel appreciated. That's what you're part of their life, and you understand. And the more you know about somebody, the more you can be there for them. And I think that's important to be able to get these open dialogue and discussions going that we need to have in our communities. As an executive director, as a director of a department, we have to be able to have those relationships with our team members, or they're not going to give you that honest feedback.
Yeah, and providing an avenue for them to do that. That's the key, because it's happening, whether you want it to or not. So providing them a controlled avenue to do that's very important. And I think now, to just like piggyback, I'm going to use your word, Matt, on what you said. I think now's the time where you have to be open-minded, and you have to educate, but also be open to what others are trying to educate you on. So it's really, truly extremely important to have an open mind and try something new and get out of your comfort zone. I think those are the biggest things that will take this to the next level. But the industry is going to be fine. We have what a great webinar. So many people. It was really, really cool. So thanks for joining us.
Yes, seriously, thank you all so very much. Heather, Maura, Matt, Amy, thank you for all the great info. There's some questions about the recording. We will send this out here, I think either later today or tomorrow. If any questions didn't get answered, we'll try to get those answered and send them directly to you as well, and I'll get all the other panelists involved in that too. If you have